Linh Cinder is the main character in the first book of Marissa Meyer's Lunar Chronicles, and then an important point of view character in the other books. She is a talented mechanic living in New Peking in 4000, and she is constantly mistreated by her abusive stepmother and even random strangers because she's a cyborg. The plot starts to kick in as out of nowhere, Prince Kai of the Asian countries asks her to fix his android, which apparently has some kind of important information stored. This whole series is basically the missing link between YA dystopia and the fairy tale retelling trend that came after this. In that, in this, it tells the story of Cinderella, but she is a cyborg in a dystopian future. Like Geordie, she is canonically disabled, and while she isn't canonically queer, this is quite interestingly intertwined with how she is gendered. She's an amputee with her left hand and half of her left lower arm, and her left leg below mid of her thigh are prostheses. She also has a lot of implants in her spine, her heart, and her eyes. Apparently she needs them because of some horrific burn as she was 11, but she can't remember this or anything before this. As we first meet her, she is saving up for replacing her foot prosthesis. She got it as she was 11, and since she grew since then, it now doesn't fit her anymore. This is a problem many real-life amputees share. As I said, real-life prostheses are very expensive. If they need to be replaced because they had worn down, the person had lost or gained a lot of weight, or simply grew up, they usually have to go into a fight with their health insurance, if they have health insurance at all. An unfitting prosthesis is not just something you can shrug off. It can lead to sores, an uneven or one-sided posture, because the body tries to compensate with other muscles, which then long-term ends up damaging joints, making muscles cramp, and creates pain in the whole body from that. It can even lead to permanent damage, which is why there are extra specialists to build prostheses, because getting something wrong can lead to so many problems. And it's a quite difficult craft. Sadly, the dehumanization Cinder faces and being called gross and not really human are also things people experience in real life, especially visibly physically disabled people. Earth in this time also faces a pandemic of an illness similar to the Black Plague called lithomorphosis. And this is the reason I will probably not be able to reread this series after the corona pandemic. Cinder tries to fix the android, but then her stepsister gets infected with lithomorphosis, and her stepmother, blaming Cinder for that, signs Cinder up for research in how to stop the plague. It is explicitly stated that this research program deliberately searches for cyborgs to experiment on and usually kill. Back then, as I read this was just horrifying, but now, after the pandemic and also in Germany, proposing to make a list of all mentally ill people to prevent crime, this is something I definitely can't stomach reading again. Because doctors experimenting on disabled people without their consent is nothing new at all. The most well-known is probably Aktion T4 of the Nazis, in which they used disabled people in institutions to find out how to kill the most people the most efficiently for the Holocaust. But make no mistake, the Nazis weren't the only people doing this. There were a lot of forced sterilizations in the USA, Canada, and other countries. mostly around 1900. There were multiple human experiments in the USA from the 40s to 60s. For example, in the 40s, a federally founded exposure of a mental hospital in Middleton and Norwich to hepatitis. In the 60s, there was a case of cancer cells being injected in debilitated patients in a New York hospital. Right now, there is Neuralink, this new technology by Elon Musk, which is said to cure autism and so on, and which killed most of the animals it was tested on, but still is set to go to human trials because a billionaire is above the law. It is marketed towards vulnerable, disabled people, which I am not surprised by at all, given how Elon Musk is openly a fascist, even if most publications are too cowardly to actually say that. And then the corona pandemic. Not directly human experimentation, but it still showed quite openly how disabled people's lives aren't worth anything. And yeah, triage and the poor doctors having to make hard choices, and a disabled patient has lesser chance of surviving it than an abled patient. But it still doesn't really feel great to know that my life isn't worth as much as another person's life just because I'm disabled. And it's especially blatant that it's because of that in my case, because autism means different processing in the brain. COVID infects the lungs. An autistic person has the exact same chance of surviving it as a neurotypical person. So saying that if they have to choose between me and the neurotypical, that they have to choose the neurotypical, this is not because of any practical reasons. This is because I'm autistic, and because of that, my life isn't worth anything. I can't even really put into words how horrific it was to have to see this so openly, and then being attacked for being selfish, for wanting my life to be worth something. But back to Cinder. She is not treated as your typical female character in the narrative. She's pragmatic and rational. She is very good with technology. She isn't the warmest person in terms of character, but what I found the most interesting is how her being a cyborg / her being disabled made people treat her as not really a woman. And this is something I experienced too. My mannerisms, but even more if people directly find out that I'm autistic, makes them see me as not being a true woman. Maybe because I'm not desirable because of that, or because I don't fit some kind of typical woman behavior. And just like Cinder, I ended up thinking this about myself too. She's described to always run around in her kind of oil-stained mechanic clothes, and not even try to fit into the usual idea of a woman because she feels like she can't really fulfill this anyway. This is especially visible with the ball at the end of the book. It also does have a vibe of this idea of being unnatural, in her case because she's a cyborg, being a bad thing that is also quite often used against trans people, like Kotu Goldie described. And how disruptive she is because she's a cyborg is driven home by one of her implants making her immune to the telepathic powers of the hostile people living on the moon, who during the time of this story are very close to declaring war on Earth. Her whole existence is disruptive and not neatly fitting into one or the other category, just as a cyborg manifesto describes the cyborg.